most of this planet's folklore. A ghost is the soul or spirit of a dead person or animal that can appear to the living. In Western cultures, a ghost or spirit is a dead person who interacts with the living world, oftentimes to retrieve something believed to be theirs in life. In ancient Igbo culture, a man is both a physical and spiritual entity. However, it is his spirited dimension that is eternal. Descriptions of ghosts vary widely from an invisible presence, translucent shapes, all the way to realistic lifelike forms. Ghosts are usually believed to inhabit the netherworld and are capable of returning in some form to affect the world of the living. Ghosts are often revered and feared due to their perceived ability to interact and affect the world of the living long after their physical presence has since left this dimension of reality. In Africa, many nations are still haunted by the ghosts of their colonial past, whereby actions taken hundreds of years ago by foreign invaders have an ever-present and haunting effect on those nations up until today. One such nation to still be haunted by the ghosts of their colonial past is the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm your host, Ebube Okoli. Welcome to Up Close and Center. On this episode of Up Close and Center, we will discuss the Democratic Republic of Congo, its past, and the ghosts that still haunt that nation till today. As always, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell icon so that you will be among the first to know every time new content becomes available. As always, if you have any additional analysis, please feel free to use the comment section. In the center of Africa lies a nation called the Democratic Republic of the Congo. According to some analysts, the DRC has an almost infinite supply of mineral resources. For many decades, the DRC has been haunted by the ghost of its past. The DRC continues to relive the legacy of one man named King Leopold of Belgium. King Leopold's actions are said to have cost the DRC an estimated 11 to 16 million lives. In ancient times, the area that became the DRC was made up of several powerful African states. As time passed, Europeans began a calculated invasion of Africa. As Europe began industrialization, so too came a new demand for strategic raw materials. Many of the raw materials Europe sought after were contained in what eventually became the DRC. These sought-after resources included rubber, which at the time was a very crucial resource. Accordingly, since Europe lacked internal wealth and natural resources, it then turned its eye to Africa as a way of obtaining what their economies needed, but severely lacked. New vaccines and medications used to combat tropical illnesses, along with sophisticated weaponry, allowed Europeans easy access to the land, its raw materials, and eventually even its people. Consequently, Europeans scrambled to claim Africa in 1885 at the notorious Berlin Conference. It was at this conference that Congo became the private personal possession of the Belgian king and was then renamed the Congo Free State. However, this state was anything but free. Although Congo was claimed by the Belgian king under the pretext of humanitarianism, some analysts claim his true intentions were quite the opposite. Like many African colonies, Leopold's ownership turned the Congo into a corporate state. Thus, eventually there came a private military force initially made up of Belgian officers. In time, African mercenaries were also enlisted. Even with these mercenaries, there was still a shortage of soldiers. Therefore, in order to fill the ranks of Leopold's private army, Africans were recruited through the process of abducting young men from nearby villages or by purchasing African refugees from the Sultanate of Zanzibar. Arabs had initially arrived in the area that became Congo several centuries prior. The Zanzibar Sultanate had expanded its influence in the Congo with a series of semi-permanent and permanent settlements that would eventually exert power over the host communities. By the time the first scramble of Africa occurred, Zanzibar had significant control in the Congo. For Leopold, Zanzibar posed the single greatest threat to his total control of the area. Eventually, this rivalry turned violent in 1892. Skirmishes broke out between Leopold's mercenaries and the Zanzibar Arab slavers, with Leopold masking the conflict as a humanitarian endeavor to end the Arab slave trade. Finally, after great losses, the Arabs and their influence were expelled from the Congo. After having secured his claim to the Congo, Leopold organized the Free State for maximization of profits at the expense of human dignity and even lives. In order to accomplish his goals of maximum profits, Leopold and his European allies utilized every and all means available to them to suit this purpose, regardless of how sinister, cruel, or even inhumane. Leopold's international buyers were indifferent as to how the natural resources were obtained, as long as the natural resources were obtained. Congo's administrators arbitrarily set rubber quotas without taking into consideration key factors such as availability of workforce, or even how much raw material could realistically be obtained. Thus, many African laborers would constantly fall short of fulfilling such unrealistic quotas. Furthermore, villages were forced to provide young men and women as workers to the companies. These human tributes served as a form of taxation. Any village that refused such would result in the village's total annihilation. As if that wasn't bad enough, such villages would also have their residents mutilated. These residents' dismembered hands, feet, and other body parts were used as public displays to both terrorize the locals and force submission into the African minds. Another method used to forcefully encourage Africans to meet their unrealistic harvest quotas was to kidnap family members and then force African workers to buy back their relatives with natural resources. However, in some cases, even where the natural resources were exchanged for the loved ones, many times workers would find that their families had already been eliminated, or were shipped to Belgium to become human displays in one of Leopold's many human zoos. In order to keep costs low, African workers were oftentimes not given the proper harvesting equipment. Rather, Africans were provided with the constant threat of mutilation or worse. Congolese were often made to harvest the natural resources beyond the natural yield of that given area. Those who could not successfully do so or simply refused to comply would be subject to, or were to have their families subject to ravenous beatings, inhumane torture, molestations, and even execution. Very soon, severed hands became a form of currency, as they could be used to provide valid excuses for when the unrealistic harvest quotas went unmet. Soon, the demand for severed human hands created a parallel market, where rural villages would be raided by soldiers for the harvesting of human hands. Soon enough, trading in human parts became the norm by the Free State's administrators. Such a trade further created an environment of constant terror. Consequently, entire civilizations were abandoned, or had most of their inhabitants abducted, mutilated, or forcefully conscripted. Leopold's direct and indirect actions are estimated to have caused the deaths of up to 64% of Congo's total population. Eventually, the Free State's pursuit of profits and financial gain is said to have cost the lives of between an estimated 11 to 16 million Congolese, with another estimated 12 million suffering some form of mutilation. However, for the Free State, business was booming as the Congolese rubber eventually came to successfully dominate the global market. With Leopold's newfound wealth, he reinvested that money into Belgium to help bring Belgium into the ranks of a nation set for continued development. Eventually, Leopold's actions caused even other Europeans to become fed up with the atrocities, to the point where Leopold was forced to transfer his ownership of the Congo. However, by this point, the Congo eventually became an area of irrelevance and underdevelopment as its resources were no longer in demand. Today, Belgium is one of the richest countries in the world. It's considered a high-income nation. It has a very high standard of living, quality of life, healthcare, education, and is categorized as very high in the Human Development Index. However, for the Congo,
there are parts of the world where survival comes only by the hands and hearts of the people who strive for it. But without technology and proper knowledge, that survival is sometimes threatened by disease.
the DRC had been so thoroughly plundered of its resources and potentials to the point that when it finally gained independence in 1960, less than 35 Congolese had actually received a university education nationwide. Today, the DRC ranks as one of the poorest nations in the world based on its GDP per capita, with the DRC's citizens earning on average just under $395 a year. This amount stands in sharp contrast with the GDP per capita of Belgium, which amounted to around 47,000 US dollars within the same time period. This concludes our broadcast of Up Close and Center. As always, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell icon so that you will be among the first to know when new content becomes available. Furthermore, if you have any additional analysis on this topic, please feel free to use the comments section. Thank you for your time and your commitment to the content.